Hey, what's up guys? Huei-Yuan coming to you from Cupertino, California. Today is April 5th, 2020, and this is our weekly Sunday session. We just finished up a great week of working through our Season 2 live lesson pack. If you haven't had a chance to pick that up yet, that's a free download that's available this week. The website for that is hueyuan.com/free lessons. It's this live lesson pack that you'll see over here on the screen. That's our free download of the week, and inside there are 10 rudimental drum lessons that we've incorporated in a variety of ways. Yesterday we wrote a lick together and we incorporated some of those lessons that we talked through in there. We're going to reference some of those exercises that you can use in there on our topic for today, which is 10 strategies to begin building your chops. So chops means a variety of things. It can mean speed, it means dexterity, it means playing loud, it means playing soft, it means endurance, it means short bursts. There's a lot that goes into the word chops. So let us know what you think chops means to you in the comments down below. But also make sure that you also let us know where you're watching from. You can say hi in the comments and say, hey, what's up, Huey? We're watching from Argentina, or we're watching from New York, or we're watching from California, or Brazil, Istanbul. Let us know where you're watching from. It's been really fun to see how international these streams have been. And something that I've been saying in all my streams is, as much as I would like to think these drumming lessons are important, I've come to learn that this is also maybe part of a bigger thing, which is to bring people together in a time of uncertainty where people can feel isolated, and we can just come together for an afternoon and talk drums and say hi to each other. So make sure that the conversations are going on. Don't feel like you can only ask questions to what's going on here. Say hello, and you'll start to see some familiar faces that are coming to the room, like Marlon and Christian and Matthew and our friend Aroba, who are coming in. So say hi to each other and talk amongst yourselves. At Huei-Yuan on all social media handles. And if you are enjoying these lessons, please let me know. You can like, follow, subscribe, share. There's an interesting thread going on today in one of the Facebook groups, and they're saying how, it's like, oh, people are posting videos and they always ask for the likes and subscribes and shares. And what I would say to that is I used to never say that in my videos, but I realized that from talking to some teachers who are not as social media savvy, or like my mom's a good example of that. She'll watch these streams and she'll be like, oh, where is this subscribe button that people always talk about? So it's partly that, but also the reason we want to get this out there through the sharing, and thank you for those hearts, those of you guys who are tapping those out. The reason we want to get this out is because not everyone has access to a local teacher, or most people don't have access to their teachers right now. So if you're able to access this information from the comfort of your home with your devices, that's why we want to get this information, so we can help as many people as we can who might be looking for some resources, whether you're a teacher or a student. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into it very quickly. I do want to say hi to a few folks as we're coming in. What's up, Marlon? Oh my, your intro and your stream looks so professional. Thanks, Marlon. And there's a lot of people who are watching from Guatemala. Woo! Hello, friends from Guatemala. Thank you so much for being here. Buenas tardes. Good to see you. Instagram folks, Met Tillery, hello, hi Joe, Matthew Blackmeta, welcome. Hi guys, thanks for popping in, and thanks for even throwing up a high five or a wave as you're coming in, just to let people know that you're in the room. Drumline Blueprint, thank you for those hearts, guys. I can see that enthusiasm as we're coming in. So let's get going, and before we get into it today, real quick, yesterday we threw up, I should have prepped a slide for this, but yesterday we threw up a lick, or we wrote a lick together during the lesson. And my experiment for the day yesterday was writing out the music on an iPad as opposed to typing it out in a notation software, which is what I usually do. And I'm going to see if I can sync those two together in a video clip for Instagram. But there's a cipher going on that I just want to shout out real quick to Quad Logics. You might have seen some of his videos that are like high quality parking lot videos online. And he just sent me a message right before I started, which is why it's kind of on my mind. But if you want to use that lesson, which was about how to begin writing a lick, you can watch that lesson yesterday, which is on YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel as well as the Drumline Chops YouTube channel. It's also on the Facebook page if you're watching that here now. But yesterday's lesson, and there's a download for that in yesterday's lesson that kind of walks you through the steps of how to begin writing your own lick. In his cipher, I think his requirements was it's like at 145 beats per minute, and he's got some guidelines for it. So maybe check out the Quad Logics page. And I've been seeing a lot of these types of projects pop up over the last couple of weeks, which is so cool, right? Seeing people put together these virtual projects. So again, technology is another way for us to connect, even though we're socially distancing. we're also socially connecting. So physically distancing, socially connecting. So let's get into it. The prerequisite to today's lesson, which is, I can't tell you guys how many times I get a direct message from somebody like, Huei, how do I build my chops? How do I get more chops? Chops. What is this word chops? So right now in the comments down below, just type out, what do you think of when people say chops, drumming chops? And I'll let you know what I think about, or what I think of when I talk about chops or think about chops. But I do want to mention that as you're typing those out, the prerequisite to developing chops is you have to have your fundamentals in place. I am not the fastest, choppiest, highest, loudest, craziest choppy guy that you'll see drumming. These are just strategies that I've used to develop my own chops, and I've helped with students develop their chops. What I do talk about and teach more, so if you're familiar with my video lessons, is about how to get these basics and these fundamentals in place. Because if your fundamentals are a little bit wonky, as you go faster, as you play higher, as you play music that's more difficult, your weaknesses will start to show. And then those cracks in your foundation will ultimately, like it's going by so fast sometimes that you don't see it, but when it comes time to maybe play with another player or be a musician and need to be able to adjust, you're going to run into some issues, right? And what we're shooting for, if you can imagine this, right? We're shooting for, how do we set up players to be able to perform at what we're seeing at the world-class level, right? And all the players that you see playing in those top groups, they've done a bunch of legwork that isn't being shown, that you don't see, right? You didn't see Kyle Suchia when he was in 7th grade in his band room, in the practice room, doing his thing, right? You didn't see Mark Perret drumming on a bus on the way home. You don't see people shedding for hours and hours and hours to get their fundamentals in place before they start doing all these crazy choppy things, right? So the caveat to today's lesson is you have to get your fundamentals in place before you start employing these strategies to build your chops. Okay, with that being said, I do have 10 strategies for you. These are not the only 10 by any means, but these are 10 that I thought would be helpful as people are trying to get stronger and faster, louder, all those things. And let's just get into it. Okay, so chops. When I think of chops, or I think like, wow, someone's got chops, there's lots of different settings for this, right? And let me see if there are a couple of examples of this. Hi, Lola, welcome to the room. Hi, Oman. Sophia says, endurance with good technique. Excellent. That's a great definition. Let's see what else. Okay, we'll get a couple more. I'll give you guys a little bit more time to tap in some suggestions on what you think chops are, okay? And I think there's lots of different kinds of chops, right? Carl Arietta's in the room. Chops McGee, Andreas Aya, popping in. Yeah, oh, great. Okay, so this is where people are starting to talk to each other in the chat, which is really, really fantastic. Dre, I'd love to hear you chime in here as well. Like, what do you think of when you say chops? Mondo Percussion, welcome to the room. Tell us what you think of when you think of chops, right? And there's no right or wrong answer, right? What you're going to see is you're going to hear lots of different descriptors or lots of different categories of chops. And I'll tell you a couple of the ones that come to mind for me, right? So typically, I think when I get asked about chops, it's about how do I play something really fast, right? Drummers are notorious for being like fast. I remember when I was getting ready to join percussion in 6th grade, my teacher, my soon-to-be teacher came and did the demonstration class, and he played Wipeout. He played Wipeout on the tom-toms, and he was like, right? And everyone was like, whoa! Like everyone knew the tune, and to see someone be able to go, right? It still never fails to disappoint, except for when those kids nowadays, they don't know Wipeout. So it's not as eye-opening for them. But typically, I think speed is what most people kind of refer to, right? I also think when people see really dense playing, like crazy rudiments, like really dense playing, where it's going by so fast and it's so dense that you can hardly tell what they're playing. Like you have to have extreme chops in order to pull something off like that, right? So I think with that, there's definitely that speed piece, but there's also the dexterity that you need to be able to do those quick twitching, muscle movements, and you're having to switch between different fulcrums very quickly if you're doing like cheeses and drags and flame drags and things like that. But there's a few different categories of chops that I want to talk us through today, because we're going to approach it through the lens of skill sets. So I've talked about this in previous lessons that you may have seen, and I'm going to share some of these definitions that I see coming through over here on what you think of chops. But there are different skill sets as you're playing, and they all kind of layer on top of each other. And so you can build your chops in each of these different skill sets, and when they get all layered together, that's what allows you to play things at extreme speeds, heights, endurance. And so the first one that we're all very familiar with is definitely 8 on hand. That is the equalizer of all exercises. Everyone, regardless of what style of music you're playing, if you've got 2 sticks in your hands, even if you don't have two sticks in your hands and you're playing a hand percussion, you have to have your legato 8 on a hand, single motion of each hand down before we start putting them together. Okay, so let me see if there are any other definition of chops coming through. Lola says, I think technique is one of the important things in anything you want to be good at. Absolutely, totally agree. And I would say even something that I learned over the years, it's not even to, and maybe Lola, you mean this as well, not even to just music, right? I remember when I first started really getting into cooking after I got out of college, and I was watching a bunch of cooking shows and reading a bunch of cooking books, and you realize that cooking, there's a lot of technique in cooking as well. And if you learn the technique of cooking, then you can start transferring it to different types of cuisines. But, you know, searing is searing, and braising is braising, and making a soup is making a soup, and there's variations on it, but there's technique that you learn in any discipline. I think that's a big part of it. Thank you for those hearts, guys, as you tapping in. Thank you. What's up? What's up? Okay. Yep. All right. And okay, I don't see any other definitions. Okay, I know some people are probably just formulating and listening on what chops are. So let's get into it. Thanks to those of you guys who are coming in, and again, let us know where you're watching from so we can kind of. I have gotten a sense of this because I've been doing a bunch of these streams over the last few weeks. But for the viewers who are coming in, I think sometimes we don't realize just how international these streams are becoming, which is like kind of mind blowing. If you know, at least when I think it's mind blowing for me at least. But okay, so let's apply it to this. They're like, I would say 6, maybe 7 core skill sets. But I'm going to start with the first one without just talking a bunch. Let's just start demonstrating, right? Okay, I haven't played today yet, so this is a good example of this. So when you're playing 8 on hand, if say you're playing match grip, okay, so when I first started working on this exercise in middle school, you know, I played it all through middle school, all into high school, and somewhere in high school, you know, I got bit by that chops bug, and I was like, okay, I want to develop my chops, right? And so I thought about, I don't know why, I still don't know like where this kind of, but for some reason in my mind, I had this imaginary number 200 in my head, okay? And I wanted to get to 200. Why? Again, I don't know why this number in particular. I think because the fastest we had played in any parts of our show in high school had been 180, and I just thought 200 was a nice round number. So I wanted to get to 200. Okay, yeah, and so with this, all right, and I had to do that without freaking out, right? So it didn't start like that. I think 160 was probably my limit, right? And then what happens is you get to the point where it goes from looking natural, you're doing all the things that your teacher tells you to do, to have a nice legato motion, to play from the wrist, to keep your shoulders relaxed, you're breathing, you're doing all the things that you would do when you're playing at a moderate tempo. But at some point, as you get faster, it starts looking like that, right? We've all seen ourselves look like that in the mirror at some point, or hopefully in a mirror. If you're not using a mirror, make sure you get in front of a mirror, right? But at some point, you go from here to here, right? You start having to tense up, or you look like someone who hasn't received the percussion training that you've had up to this point, right? So the first tip that I have is you have to know your numbers. You know, this is like a business tip, right? If you're running a business, you have to know your numbers. How much is your income? How much are your expenses? How much is your payroll? You've got to know your numbers. Same thing with percussion. You need to know your numbers. For most students, they've never figured out, okay, well, where do I usually start playing 8s? Right? If you don't have a number, and it's interesting. I did this when I was practicing, but I didn't figure this out until I started really teaching consistently, right? Like you need to know the numbers of where you're starting, and they can fluctuate. You can start a little bit slower, a little faster, but you should know which tempo markings you're starting at, which tempo markings are you hitting at, and then really kind of you're trying to expand the range of how fast you can play it, right? So in this instance, let's say we're starting at, let's just throw out 112. Okay, I usually start a little bit under 120. Nice relaxed tempo, and we're so usually at this tempo, I can check a lot of things in a student, make sure the stick motion is smooth and legato. All the notes are the same height, you're getting the same sound, it's coming from the wrist. And we work through a variety of heights and dynamic levels. Right, and we're talking all fundamentals here, right? And then we gradually speed the tempo up in 8-beat increments. So then you go 120, 128, 136, 144, 152. Let's just say we've done this for maybe 10 minutes now, and we're at the 160 range. It still looks pretty good for the student. Right? And then I start speeding and say, okay, and then we're playing and I gradually speed them up and we get to 168. And then the left hand starts struggling. Okay, so there's a significant drop off, or it starts to get a little bit tense at 160 or 168, and then it gets to the point where one hand can't keep up. One hand's usually stronger than the other, right? And so there's one hand that's significantly struggling, and you go, oh, that's my number. That's my threshold for where I drop off from being able to do it the way I'm supposed to or want to do it, and my physical abilities, okay? So then you need to write that number down, and you're gonna have different numbers for different skill sets. You'll have a number for 8 on a hand, and even within 8 on a hand, if you made a chart, you'll have a number for forte, you'll have a number for mezzo forte, and you'll have a number for piano, right? Like I told a story yesterday in yesterday's live stream where my teacher said play 8s as fast as you can at 3 inches. I had no idea what my number was, and I just started doing it. I was like, and I embarrassed myself because I hadn't done my numbers, right? And so it wasn't a big deal, it was fine. But you should know what your numbers are for each of those dynamic markings within 8s, and then I would also add crescendo and decrescendo, and then basically any variation that you use with 8s, you should have a number associated with those. I should make an example chart of what this looks like, I think, so people can kind of start filling in their numbers. But knowing your numbers is what will allow you to do step 2. Okay, so step 2 is to bump up against your threshold. So now that you know, let's say your number's at 160, right, and you've written that number down. The next day when you come back, you're going to start back at a tempo that you know you can do well, right? And depending on how much time you have to practice, maybe you can't start all the way back at 112 again, right? Maybe the next day, because you have a limited amount of time to practice, you need to start at like 144. Right? And as you approach that tempo, you need to be moving into that 160 range. If you can do it at 160 and 168 is where it starts to get a little ugly, right? Then you need to be going into that 160 range, going into that 168, and maybe even going into 176 if it doesn't look like complete garbage, right? If you're trying to move into this chop building mode. And I'd also say, I hear something that I heard in this past week from Todd Meehan's Liquid Drum Stream, which was a great point to say out loud, which is you shouldn't always be in chop building mode. There's different types of practice. Sometimes you're just in like, hey, I'm warming up and getting my body ready to practice mode. Sometimes you're in like, I'm in learning notes mode. I've got to learn this music part. Sometimes maybe towards the end of your practice session, maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to spend the last 15 minutes trying to push myself physically so that I can get stronger and be able to play a certain section. Or you say like, hey, today's my chop session. I've got an hour and I'm just about building chops. Maybe we should do a Sunday stream where we're just building chops and we're trying to expand. It's a little bit tougher because the way you run that session is a little bit different depending on where your chops are. So I'm not really sure how we would do that as like a group if I can't see people playing and if I'm like leaving people in the dust. That's a little bit harder to simulate. But Now, step 2 is you're bumping against that threshold. So if you can play 160 and you're always playing at 160, then you're never going to move into that arena where you are struggling. And what's going to happen is, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, right? Because tip number 5, I'm getting ahead, is consistent effort over time. As you keep bumping up against that, one day you're going to come back and 168 is going to be like, oh, that's not bad. And then 176 is going to be your new struggle point, and so forth and so forth. So back to my original story. That's what happened with me. I was at 160, and then at 170 it looked terrible, and then I bumped up against it. And this takes us to strategy number 3, which is to place it against something that you can do well. So in this example, we're always starting at a tempo that's below our threshold, and we're pairing it against something that we can do well. So I'm doing well at this tempo. And the reason for this is you're always referencing back to what does it sound, what does it feel like, what does it look like when it's done correctly. And then you're trying to transfer that and replicate all that goodness into the area that is currently all badness, right? And you're trying to make the bad part sound and look and feel just as good as the good part, right? So put those two against something that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, so that you know what you're trying to replicate in this new section, okay? So that's strategy number 3. And then strategy number 4, it says to move into the extremes. So you're bumping into the threshold, Strategy number 4, we're moving into the extremes. So at one point, 200 seemed extreme, because like I could barely get 192 out, right? I was like, right? And I would move into the extreme. So you think it's ridiculous. Like just go, and this is gradually, right? Of course, you're not just going from like 120 to 200. You're stair-stepping your way up. And when you think you can't play any faster, just move into the extreme. Go into that next faster tempo. If you don't think you can roll any longer, then roll even longer. I'll give an example. We used to do this this past week. Another story came about how we would drive to our drum corps camps. It would be going from Texas to Illinois. We have these 15, 18-hour, it seemed like, 18-day long car rides up to Illinois. And we would play this game where someone would turn on a song, whoever was DJing in the front seat, and we would just roll for the entirety of the song. Okay, so I would say let's try it together. But I think most of you are probably just watching me do it right now. But try this later, or we can try a little bit of it now if you want. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull up some music. I need to get like some music queued up here. How about is this? Let me see what this sounds like. Okay, try this with me, okay? If you have your sticks, we'll just do this for a little bit. Here we go. Check. 2, 16th, check. In. Okay, here we go. Start rolling. 5, 6, ready, roll. And we're rolling full out right now, right? One more phrase. Right? Now, that's halfway through the track, right? And we didn't do any warm-up before this, so your hands probably feel terrible unless you've been drumming before that, right? But you probably, if you did that with me, you are starting to feel a little bit of that fatigue in your arms, which is good. You have to move into tempos where you feel the burn and you feel the fatigue. in learning one of my buddy Mikey's licks last week and in writing the lick that we did yesterday, I felt some burn in my right arm. And I usually don't play long enough or anything difficult enough to actually cause my arms to burn, but I started feeling a little bit of burn. I was like, oh, I'm starting to break down some of the muscle. The blood is pumping to my arms. And like when you're working out, you've got to break those muscle cells so that when they grow back bigger and stronger, right? It's the same thing with this case. You need to move into those extremes where you're tired. Woodwind and brass players know this. When you first start playing, your face just feels like goo after 10 minutes of playing. But as you do it more and you move into the extremes of length, duration, speed, you start to get stronger. Okay, so that's very important and part of this this building chops passage. Okay, so a fun way of doing this is to do it with a friend. You can turn on a timer. That's a little bit more boring, right? When I was teaching high school, I would always have my students come in and I'd say, okay, you're gonna roll for 3 minutes, and they'd be like, and they'd never done this before, right? So we put 3 minutes on the timer, and this brings us to our next point. This is number 7. I'm jumping around here. I need to reorder these into the order that we're talking about. But strategy number 7 is to never give up. So don't give up. This is very key, and this came up in a lesson that I was doing with my buddy Dre, where, like, let's say you're doing what we were just doing, we're rolling. And it gets to the point where you can't do anymore, your left hand is dead, right? And most people just go, oh, and they give up, I can't do it, right? And that's exactly what you don't want to do. You have to keep going. Even if you are dying, and it looks like this, and you're like, you have to keep going and push yourself to the end of the song or to the end of the timer, or just go to the very, very, very end of this, okay? So a video that I got asked about, and I was gonna repurpose an old video of myself explaining this, but I never got to it. So I'm just gonna shoot a new explanation of what this is. But an example of never giving up or not giving up is an exercise called 8 and 25. You've probably used this exercise to help you build your roll chops, but it's like this. It's very straightforward. Okay, so you have 8 counts of check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. So 8 counts of triplet check, followed by 24 counts of roll, and then a release on beat 25. Okay, so that's why it's called 8 and 25. And the way you want to think of the roll, when you roll, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, off. And you have that release on the downbeat of 25. Okay, so 3 sets of 8 equals 24. And then now you have 4 phrases of 8 beats. 8 beats of check, 8, 8, 8, and then release on 25. And now you have 8 and 25. Okay, so you've probably played this before. Let's try this at 160 together, okay? Okay, and we'll just play this a couple times. Let me turn the 8th. Okay, 1, 2, and 8, and 25. One more time, counting this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Roll. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Again for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Okay, so I'm already starting to feel the burn as it is with 8:25, and you can do this much, much slower. I'm just going this tempo for time's sake here. But if you did it at 120, this would be good. Probably should have done this at 120. Let's do it at 120 once for the people who are like learning this for the first time, okay? So this will give us a chance to count. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Roll. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Okay? So if you're thinking 8 counts of check, 8 counts of roll, 8 counts of roll, 8 counts of roll, that's 8 and 25. Okay, now where we start moving into the extremes here, and where we go back to this point of not giving up, is you can do the 8 and pyramid. Okay, the 8 and 25 pyramid. It's not really 8 and 25. I guess it's the triplet roll pyramid, okay? And this is evil, so get ready for this, okay? So the way it works is, I made a Tuesday tip about this on my YouTube channel, but you're getting it now, okay? So for this triplet roll chop building exercise, you're gonna start with 8 counts of check and then 8 counts of roll. So it looks like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Roll 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Okay? Then you're gonna repeat it. You're gonna do 8 counts of check and then 16 counts of roll. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Okay? Then you'll play 8 counts of check with 3 groupings of 8, or that 8 and 25 exercise that we just talked about. 1, 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. Okay? And then you repeat that 8 and then 4 groups of 8, 8 and then 5 groups of 8, 8 and then 6 groups of 8, 8 and then 7 groups of 8, all the way up to 8 and 8 groups of 8, which will take you to 8 and 64. So you're pyramiding your way all the way up, and then you pyramid your way all the way back down. So then it goes to 8 and 7, 8 and then 7 groups of 8, 6 groups of 8, 5 groups of 8, 4, 3, 2, 1, until finally you're back to 8 and 8. 8 counts of check and 8 counts of roll. So you pyramid up and then you pyramid down. If you do this whole thing, and now my teacher Brandon is saying that we should do it together so you can see what it looks like, and then you're actually doing it so you can get a feeling for this. If you do this, you're going to feel the fatigue. And the key here is when you get to 8 and 64, even if you look like this, and it sounds like garbage, you keep moving your hands, okay? And you need to do whatever it takes to use your brain to tell your body to get back to what it sounded like when you're doing this. So most commonly, remember to breathe. Drop your shoulders and relax. Make the motion as smooth as possible. You're recovering as much as you can during those 8 counts of check in between. And this is kind of a random tip, right? But also smile. So a couple things come from this, but if you smile, it'll help you release some endorphins, so you reminds you to relax just a little bit. So try smiling. And something else that a friend once showed me is like, if you kind of like, as you're rolling and as you're hating life here, you can kind of just like move your elbow a little bit to make sure that you haven't just locked up your entire arm. And so if you just move your elbow to make sure that everything from the neck, shoulder, and arm down is still relaxed, just make sure that this is all still loose and relaxed as you're gritting your way through this long roll. All right, so let's do it. 8 pyramid all the way up, 8 to 8 groups of 8, 64, 8 to 64, and then we'll pyramid our way back down. And as a result, this is also a brain exercise to see if you lose count of where you are. So I'm just gonna play, and I'll kind of mouth the counts. Sometimes when I'm counting out loud and playing at the same time, you know, it's hard to keep things going. I can do it. I'll try to do it. All right, here we go. I can hear my friends be like, come on, man, just do it. All right, here we go. 8 counts of check. Marlon says, 8 and 25 brings so many memories with the challenge Carietta put up several months ago. Yeah, Carl did a great 8 and 25 challenge. Let me see if there are any questions real quick. Hi, guys. Watching from Singapore. Oh, awesome. Hi. Hey, Chuck Deeds here. Thank you for that. Thanks for letting us know we were watching from, guys, for coming in. Kevin. Hi, Kevin. From Brazil. Awesome, awesome. Man, awesome. Okay. Eduardo, welcome. All right, here we go. 8 pyramid up to 64 all the way through. Take your sticks out. Guys, it's not fair. If you're going to sit here and just watch me burn my way through, the least you could do is do it with me, right? So take your pad out, take your sticks out. 120 on the mat. We'll do this one time through. And let's see how we hang, okay? All right. Good luck. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, roll. Here. 1. Check. 2 groups of 8. 1, 6, 7, 8. 2. Check. 3 groups of 8. 1, 2, 3. Check. 4 groups of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check. Relax. 5 groups of 8. 2, 3, 4. Breathe. 5. Here comes the check. And 1. 6 groups of 8. 1, 2. Relax the shoulders. 3, 4, 5, 6. Here comes the check. Go to your happy place. Breathe. 7 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here comes the check. 1. Breathe. Relax. 8. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Stopping here. 5, 6, 7, and stop. All right. Good job. You did it. So this is the magic part of this exercise. So you probably feel tense. Your hands might be cramping a little bit. Maybe the quality suffered, but you didn't give up. You kept on going, right? You're moving into extreme tempos. And 120 is actually not that extreme, right? But we've moved into that endurance piece. So because you're doing it for long periods of time, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's burning. I can feel that now, right? But guess what? When you have to play 8 and 8 now, or 8 and 25, that's going to feel so easy. And actually, I'm going to show you something here in just a second. We're going to give our hands a second for the blood to come back into our arms, and I'm going to show you something really, really cool about that. Let me just check out some of these comments that are coming through. Aiden says, play 16th notes and only accent the first notes, then the next measure only accent the E's and the ands until you get back to accenting the first notes. Aiden, yeah. Oh, so Aiden's talking about like a 16th note grid as you're moving it through. That's a good way of practicing. That doesn't really work your chops per se, but that's one way of systematically working with it. The restart it and only diddle the non-accented notes. Oh, I see. So then you're adding a roll passage to the 16th note grid. Yep, that's a good way of doing it. Jason says, is there a difference between diddles and double stroke roll? There is, Jason. I can talk about that in 1 second. We'll differentiate between what I mean by like drags and rolls and diddles. But let me show everyone something here in a second. And I want to rerun these comments here that says... Marlon says, to me, chops is the definition of well-developed set of skills based on a strong sense of the basic fundamental technique for drumming and for any other activity. Great, Marlon. So Marlon mentions that you need those fundamentals and basic techniques, and you're developing a strong sense. Chops is a well-developed set of skills based on some of the basic fundamental techniques for drumming. Yeah. And I would say, Marlon, that for me, like, you have to move, once you have that established, you're moving into like the extreme versions of it. So you're either going faster or louder or lower or more dense, right? You're doing like the Hulk version of the fundamentals. So you're pushing your fundamentals to an extent. Okay, so here's what you would do. If we were in a lesson together, you're a student and we're saying like, hey, I'm trying to build my roll chops. So 120 is where we're trying to we're not building speed here, right? Right now we're building endurance and strength. So 120 doesn't seem that fast. You can do 8 and, like for most of you, you're probably at 8 and 25. It felt fine, but when you're stacking a bunch of them together, by the time you get to 8 and 64, you feel that burn. So then we would play 8s like 2 or 3 times. Let's just do it now. 1, 2, ready, go. So you're just relaxing your hands, making sure that the relaxed shoulders relax. One more time. 1, 2, ready, go. Double stops. And stop. Okay, so you can do double stops just for the sake of time, right? Now, this is where the magic happens. So we're going to go back to that 8 and roll exercise, and we're just going to do 8 and 25. And what I want you to notice is how do your hands feel now than they did when you finished 8 and 64. Okay, so this is just 8 and 25 now. 1, 3, 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, so for me, what I notice is that definitely feels easier than the 8 and 64, right? Because it's significantly less notes I'm having to play. But that also feels better than when I played 8 and 25 the first time, or got to the 8 and 25 portion of the pyramid, right? I felt like I could dig in a little bit more. My hands are a little bit stronger, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I've got this thing, right? And so this strategy is like a super secret strategy. It's not really a super secret, but I remember I'd like discovered this once when I was practicing. I was like, whoa, this is like a thing, right? So whatever your threshold is, whatever your max tempo is, you move into that extreme. You don't give up. You're pushing yourself, right? And then you finish, and you're like, oh, I feel terrible, right? And then you play 8s 2 or 3 times to stretch things out. You grab a drink of water. You hang out for 2 or 3 minutes. And then you don't do what most people do, which is you go on to the next thing or you finish your practice session. You go back to it one more time. And all of a sudden, you're going to have these like super Hulk hands. You're going to be able to do whatever you were doing a second ago better, stronger, faster. And now that gives you like a little extra, like boom, a little level up. And now you've just expanded your threshold a little bit. This process is kind of involved. It's hard to explain, but now that we've kind of done it together, hopefully you can see. And this applies to rolling. This applies to 8s. This applies to singles. It applies to just any skill set where you're pushing the extreme, mostly for tempo and endurance, I would say. You push yourself past the limit, you rest, you drink water, you play 8s, you just chill for 2 or 3 minutes, and you come back to it. The blood comes back into your arms, and then you're going to be able to do it faster and better than you could a minute ago. Okay? I didn't give this strategy a number. It's kind of a culmination of a bunch of these strategies at this point, so this will be like strategy 11, I guess, a bonus strategy. Okay, so let me make sure I've checked these off. I made a little list right before we started. Bump up against your threshold, moving to the extremes, consistent over in time. Here's like the endurance. So the pyramid is the endurance bit. 7, we talked about don't give up. 8, 9, 10. Okay, so let me see if there are any questions before I give you the last 3 strategies. We're coming up towards the end of our time together here. The restart it and only diddle the then restart. Oh, okay, that was previous Aiden. Thanks, Aiden, for that exercise. Hi, William. Hi, Douglas. Okay, no? All right. Okay, no comments. Oh, there was a couple comments that I meant to answer. So let me answer Jason's first. Jason says, is there a difference between diddles and a double stroke roll? So you could say that a double stroke roll is comprised of diddles. So we hear that term diddle in paradiddle. And the one, like technicality that I would mention about diddles is sometimes you hear people call these diddles like where the bass subdivision is this, and that single, they're not, someone would call like a diddle. I call those drags, actually. And Dre and I actually talked about this in a joint stream together. We call those drags because a diddle should be the same hand speed of the notes around it. So in paradiddles, for example, it's right. And so in that context, if you played those as diddles, If you play it a double paradiddle, no, let's play a paradiddle diddle. Paradiddle diddle, paradiddle. I'm playing diddles, right? And then if you increase it, you get the roll, right? But if you're playing this, you're just playing a roll, and I wouldn't call those diddles per se, right? So it's all terminology. Roll, you're just creating sustain through like double strokes. You can have different length rolls, 5-stroke, 7-stroke, 9-stroke, 13-stroke rolls. And then I would differentiate these and these as diddles, paradiddles, and drags. So a good example of this is Aiden mentioned earlier how you could play the 16th note accent grid, and then when you get to the end, you put, Aiden says you fill in all the non-accent notes with diddles. Right? I wouldn't call those diddles in that case. I would call those fill it in with a roll or fill them in with drags. Pedro Carnero. Holy cow. Hey, Pedro. Good to see you, my friend. Guys, if you're on YouTube right now and you're not following Pedro, or for all the percussionists on Instagram, Facebook, you should definitely check out Pedro Carnero, Carneiro, Carneiro. Yep. And check out Pedro's page, definitely on YouTube. I'll tell you that the first video I saw of Pedro was on YouTube, and Pedro's just an absolute monstrous percussionist, but also just an all-around musician, an avid biker, father, and we connected online over the past couple years. So thanks for joining the stream, Pedro. Pedro asks a question. He says, how could you use inverted rolls? Ooh, thanks for teeing up this question. How could you use inverted rolls as a strategy for building stamina in the scope of what you just showcased? Yeah, so inverted rolls, typically when we play rolls, and I talk about this when we play shups instead of double beat, like you see this double beat exercise all the time. Right? And we spend so much time as instructors and teachers saying like, oh, you've got to make that second note just as strong as the first note. But the rhythm itself is like da-da, 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 da-da. So a lot of times I opt for another double beat exercise that we use in rudimental percussion all the time called shups. Or Irish Spring. In Irish Spring, it's a triplet-based exercise, so it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So 1, ba bum, 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 ba bum. So what that does is it puts that second note on the downbeat, so it feels and sounds stronger to the listener. So it's a little bit easier to help people make that second note just as strong as that first note. Right, if you're playing some sort of rock drum set groove, you're familiar with playing shuffles, and you're scooping to that second note, right? So Pedro makes a great point that if you use inverted rolls, for example, so in a duple inverted roll stroking might be right, left, right, left, right. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, right? And so what that does is now we're putting that second note on a strong beat. So what's a way that we could do this? So let's apply this to a different context now. So we did 8 and 8, 8 and 16, 8 and 24 in a triplet setting. You could do this in a duple roll setting too if you want to work on your duple roll endurance, chops, strength, right? Like let's get stronger. Guys, I'm old now, so I very rarely work on building my chops anymore. This is more for the young guns who are in high school and college who want to build their chops. So sometimes it's funny for me to talk about building chops, but anyway, so you take this inverted roll. So we have, I'm kind of emphasizing the right hand so you can hear where the beat is. Let me turn a metronome off first. Eighth note, just a little bit more. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kind of hard to do slowly. I want to push faster than that, right? But you're noticing, so you could do like 4 counts of check, 4 counts of roll, 4 counts of check, 8 counts of roll, 4 counts of check, all the way up to, let's say, 64. That might be a little bit extreme. You know, you pick how many times you want to do it. Like 4 times 8, 32, right? 4 and 32 to the point where you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and let me throw one more variation in there. So now you're teaching your right hand to get like, come on, get that second note out. This will become even more apparent if you go to like a more, let's just up to like 140. $180. Oh, that's kind of weird because you're going to bring that left hand right on the 8th. Let me turn this off. And right now, I'm trying to make this a little bit more apparent to the viewers out there. And also, I'm over-exaggerating that right hand to make that second note stronger. The variation that I would throw, ultimately you want it to sound just as smooth as your regular roll. So I wouldn't accent it. Ultimately, I would go like this. If I'm building chops, maybe I would accent it. But in performance, I might go. And make it as even as I can. The second variation that I would throw into that is to do it with your left hand lead also. So left. So your left hand's going. So now your left hand is forced to feel and sound like that dominant hand. And you're doing the inverted rolls, and you're doing the endurance building pyramid all the way up. Yeah, that would be a great like chop building workout if you wanted to work away. And if this is too fast, right, pick a tempo where you can do it slowly. Make sure you're coming out in time with the metronome. You saw me like faltering a couple times. And so once you get that coordination, you're like, oh, I have a tendency to push or drag. Make sure that your timing is really solid. And then as you stair step your way up, you'll figure out your thresholds and your breaking points and all that stuff that we talked about previously. Thank you, Pedro. That was a great comment. Thanks for taking us on that parallel. Jason says, let me throw this question up here that Pedro has. That was Pedro's question from earlier. Jason says, do you think Chino Hill's drumline is good? Yeah, they're fantastic. They're monstrous. You know, before I moved out to California, I was always like, what are they feeding those children in California? They're amazing. And then you realize that Ian Grom and John Mapes and the whole staff at Chino, they've been there for so long. They've built this amazing pipeline. There's a culture amongst the students, but they're going A class, upper class, world class. Those kids are seeing it and hearing it from day one. So it's really incredible to see what they've built. Big fan of their program. Marlon says, a question I've experienced myself and many others have asked me before, how to know when you are reaching a point where you are exhausting your strength in a good way, and also you could get injured by doing something out of a context when playing anything for an extended period of time. Let's use 825 as an example. Okay, so that's a great question, Marlon. I would say a definite red flag is if something starts to hurt. And for all the teachers and players out there, please feel free to chime in and offer your 2 cents as well. Even if you're watching this on the replay, please leave your comments, okay? Because there's a lot of other teachers and students watching this now, so we can all benefit from sharing this information from this, okay? For me, a red flag for sure is if something starts to hurt, and there's something different between like getting sore and feeling fatigued. Like if you're running and you feel tired, like you're tired, right? But you're not hurting until you have like a pain in your side, and sometimes you push it. In drumming, if you feel any sort of like sharp pain in your wrist, that's bad. You definitely should not be doing that. And usually anytime, like in the rare instances that I've experienced pain, it hasn't been because of fatigue necessarily. It's usually because of tension. Tension from me squeezing too tightly, or I'm downstroking and all the shock is getting absorbed into my hand, or maybe I'm overextending. I remember there's this period when I was playing a lot of 4 mallets, and I was playing, probably practicing more than what was healthy, and my wrist every once in a while would kind of hurt up here. And that's your cue usually it's just that you're just being too tense. You're squeezing too tightly, and maybe you're hitting too hard. And so that's just always a reminder to relax and flow and breathe, and then to rest. So Marlon, to your question, like, what is too much? I think if you're stair-stepping your way up slowly and gradually, and you feel tired, if you're in this chop building phase, I think that's okay. But if you feel any sort of pain as you're doing it, that means you either need to rest, relax, or sometimes it also is a sign that maybe you didn't warm up enough. Like you just jumped into 8 in Pyramid without warming up, and you did a live stream and then you started to play. My hands don't hurt right now. But I'm saying it's amazing what a good warm-up will do. There was a period of time in my practicing life where I would just get to what I was trying to learn, again, because I was short on time and I didn't have time to properly warm up. And then I realized that, man, if I just warmed up for 15, 20 minutes, my practice sessions were actually a lot better. I was playing less wrong notes, I was less tense. Things just came a little bit easier because I gave my body the appropriate time to get comfortable with the instrument and make sure everything was functioning smoothly and correctly. Okay, so that's what I would add about that. Okay, we're coming up on the end of our stream Instagram, so let me just blast out these last 3 tips really quick. It's not going to be quick. I'm not going to be able to finish these in the time that the Instagram stream ends. So Instagram folks, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to keep going on YouTube and Facebook to make sure everyone gets the information. But I do want to thank Instagram if you guys are coming in and you've been watching to this point. If you've been blasting out those hearts, thank you so much. Those of you who've been sending the direct messages afterwards and following. Those of you who are following on Instagram, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And we'll catch you in our streams next week. I do want to mention real quick that next week I won't be doing like our long lesson streams on a single topic like we've been doing for the last 3 weeks, because next week I'm spending the entire week with our beta video course members for the left-hand traditional course, the video course at drumlineblueprint.com/courses. If you go there, there's a whole video course that we're building right now that's focused on how to build this left-hand traditional setup. Okay, and so with those beta members, there's 20 of them, and we've actually expanded. I got a couple messages over the week. We've expanded it beyond 20. So all in all, it's probably we're gonna probably cap it at 30. There's like 24 of us right now. So next week it's going to be just streaming with them and making sure that they've got this set up. But I'll come in next week and maybe just do like a quick pop in and say hello to everyone, and we'll do like some light Q&A, something like that maybe. But if you are interested in learning how to play left-hand traditional, next week with our beta course members, we're going to be answering all their questions. And basically what I'm trying to do is to get a lot of questions about left-hand traditional. So if you're watching this right now and you want to ask a question about left-hand traditional, send me a direct message, and that way I can make a video answering that question, and then we're going to put it in that video course. And then once we build out that video course all the way with our beta members, then we'll relaunch it to the public at large so that everyone can have access to that course. And there's going to be a subscription plan and a full plan for that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Or better yet, you can snag one of these last few spots that we have for the left-hand traditional video course. Again, it's drumlineblueprint.com/courses. Okay? All right, Instagram, thanks for watching. There's one more. Danish says, I've just been watching, switching back and forth. Awesome. Or practice pads. This is a Beetle percussion practice pad. If you go to beetlepercussion.com, you'll see them. They are handmade, so they take a little bit to make, and you have to check in with them to see what they have in stock and what's available. Wow, I'm loving this multicam. Yeah. Oh, Danish is going back and forth. Yeah. Between Drumline Chops and my personal one. Okay, awesome. Marlon says, thanks, Wade, for such amazing content. You are welcome, Marlon. Thank you so much for your comment. Let me give you guys the last 3 tips. We're going to move through these last tips pretty quickly, but it's Instagram. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay? Bye. Okay, for everybody else, Facebook, YouTube, we're on tip number 8 now. Okay, so you've built up your chops, your speed, and I would say everything that we just did applies to every dynamic level, right? So if you do 8 in pyramid, this is a different skill set or a different chop. This. Like when we were rolling up high, that's like chops, you need muscle, right? But down here, you need that feel, right? The touch that you experience, right? Same thing if you're playing concert buzz rolls, right? There's something about rolling for a long time where your body just has to figure out how to stay relaxed. Otherwise, you won't survive, right? So out of necessity, out of survival, you're kind of teaching your body what it needs to do to remain calm and consistent through a long roll passage. Okay, so everything that we've talked about up to this point, make sure that you move through all the dynamic levels. Okay, so now we're moving into like a sector of chops that isn't just about the way you practice it. Well, this is a way you practice, but it's kind of its own subset. So we're talking about anything that is hand-to-hand and requires you to coordinate your hands together. So with these skill sets, I would include like paradiddles, paradiddle diddles, double paradiddles, triple paradiddles. And Bill Bachman, Bill would like to add like quadruple paradiddles. It's not a standard PA instrument, but I do agree with Bill that that's like something about that last one. Or, oh, he applies it to paradiddle diddle diddle. Right. So those rudiments, and then also your flam rudiments. Okay. So that would include flam accents, flam accents, flam taps, anything that is hand to hand. Inverted flams, okay? And strategy number 8 is with those types of combination hand things that you have to play, you have to go through a very particular like percussion learning stage, which is where you break the composite piece of vocabulary down into each hand-to-hand component. Okay, so if you've seen my videos, you've seen me talk about this in several videos. But for example, if you're playing a flam accent, if you separate the hands, you see that your right hand's just playing this. Okay, and this is comprised of a lot of different things. You have a downstroke where you keep the stick down, and then you have to play 3 notes of equal height and volume. So if you have an issue with your accent tap, and see, this is an example of where these fundamental skills are getting layered on top of each other, right? If you have something wrong with your accent tap, and you can't keep that stick down, right, then you're going to have an issue getting to here. If you can't play 8s at this tempo, or you can't even play triple beat, how fast you can play triple beat basically will limit how fast you can play flam accents. Because how fast you can do this is the limit for how fast you're going to be able to play. No one can play flam accents faster than they can go. If you still want to have that quality of height separation between the accented and non-accented notes. And when you break them down hand by hand, you're going to reveal that hand that's typically weaker, which is your left hand. Are you getting a true downstroke? Can you play 3 equal notes in the left hand? And when you do the breakdowns and you gradually add on, so I'm not going to go in depth with this breakdown, but this breakdown with the first one is, then you add a flam, and then you add another note, and then you add another note, and then you fill it in. And then you do everything off the left. Right. When you go through each of these steps, you're revealing the weaker hand, you're making sure the left hand matches to the right hand, you're making sure that mechanically you can do everything that each hand needs to be doing by itself separately, and then you're gradually putting the hands together so that when you end up with the final product, everything is working the way it's supposed to because you've built it up step by step from the ground up. So same thing with paradiddle diddles. Anyone that you see that can go like this, they've done all these paradiddle and paradiddle diddle breakdowns. They didn't just wake up one day and go, paradiddles, right? So you've got to go through those breakdowns, single hand breakdowns, to build that chop setup. And then you apply strategies 1 through 7 that we've talked about into these single hand breakdowns. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. No questions. Okay, good. All right, strategy number 9, low end is different from high end, control your heights. So I have a lesson in the free season 2 live lesson pack, right? Which is in our download this week, right there. Okay, there's a lesson in there called Control Your Heights. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Come up here, zip it a boom, bada ba bee. It's getting better. I'm starting to not look like a complete doofus trying to stream and share the screen and stuff. And then of course I can't find the lesson as I compliment myself. Where is it? Here. Okay. So in this lesson, there's this very important thing, right? It's a like we talked about this earlier. You're playing through forte, you're playing through piano, you play through mezzo forte, and then you play through these last couple times, okay? But down here is this like secret little section that looks simple and it's like, okay, whatever. But this is a big part of how you're going to be able to play these multi-height chop things, right? So typically, you see people practice this all the time. It's like forte and piano, and notice in this example, you're doing that thing that we talked about earlier, which is you're putting something that you can do well with the thing that you're working. In this instance, you're trying to work on that downstroke. 1 and 2 and 3. Beat 3 is notorious in this example for getting slammed and sounding harsh. 1 and 2 and ah! 1, 2, wham! Right? And so in this instance, you're putting it against this, which sounds great. You're flowing, you're relaxed. And you're trying to make beat 3 sound exactly like beats 1 and 2 and, but you end in this piano volume. Okay? There's a great question in the in Todd's masterclass for this week. They said, hey, when I play that downstroke, my stick wobbles a little bit. Is that normal? And it is. The answer is it wobbles. And I made a discovery because I was like watching myself, and I've got the whole live stream video thing set up, and so I can see things and slow it down. I'm much more like analytical, even more so than when I was a student and really, really practicing hard. And even now, I still have a little bit of a wobble at the bottom of my stroke. It's just so... I just like recover from it so quickly that you don't really even see it anymore. You only see it if you're slowing it down and watching it. If you're recording at 24 frames per second and you slow it down also, right? But I call that residual rebound. There's a little bit of boring at the very end, right? The residual rebound that happens at the end. But what you do is you learn how to not squeeze the stick. Nothing changes as the stick's going down. You're not squeezing. Everything's the same. It isn't until after the stick rebounds that your hand does something to restrict the height to which the stick is going to rebound. If I just throw the stick down, it's like wall ball. It'll just go back, right? But in this instance, I'm doing the same thing. The bead strikes the pad. I haven't done anything. After it strikes the pad, then the analogy that I use here is that you're just catching the stick with your hand. You're catching the rebound. You're not squeezing. I'm just catching the rebound of the stick, and I'm using the weight of my hand and my wrist as a hinge to prevent the stick from going up past my desired height. Okay, so I'm going... right? And you'll see in very slow motion my stick's actually going Bing. Ooh, and then it comes back down and it ends at 3 inches. All right, and I catch it here and I bring it back down to 3, but it's happening so quickly you don't even see that little catch back down, 3, okay? And I go, okay? That's the exercise, whether you're practicing it in box 3s, whether you're doing Bill's variation, whatever axe and tap exercise that you're doing. Bill had a great comment about this too. You want to surround it with more of these and not just do a bunch of these, which is what I did a bunch of in high school. And as a result, I got very slammy first stage of my playing career, right? And so don't be afraid to throw in some legatos, right? But this part of the handout is something that, I mean, unfortunately, people don't practice as much. But you need to practice your accented, non-accented notes at varying dynamics. So in that previous example, we were doing just like 2 heights. Here, you want to also practice, for example, if you said 9 to 6, forte to mezzo forte, it would look like this. I remember the first time someone asked me to do this, I was like, oh, my hands couldn't do it. It was like, I only had one setting, which was down. So you have to be able to play a note and rebound to mezzo forte, or play a note, rebound to piano, play a note, rebound to mezzo forte. If you're at 12 inches, play a note, rebound to 9 inches, or forte. Play a note, rebound to where you stopped. So you have all these different settings to where you can rebound to based off of your practice. Right? This is, I would say this is synonymous with when you're playing four mallets on a marimba or you're practicing your orchestral excerpts and you practice shifting to your next note. We're shifting to the next height of the note that we're playing so that you have all these different settings. So in this handout, these are just some variations that you might want to try. You could try forte to piano, fortissimo to piano, which is similar to this. And then you have fortissimo to mezzo forte, like, because we do a lot of, you know, DCI now is like, this is forte and this is piano. But so if you're not practicing your action tap exercises, you might realize that you have trouble rebounding to 6 inches and you're actually going like piano and then easing your way up to mezzo forte. And then, of course, fortissimo to forte, you don't see that as often. And then if you're playing something like are you practicing all these single hand breakdowns at varying dynamic levels? Because strategy number 9 is, again, low end is a different end than like a high end. So you've got to work this low end also. So you might have low end chops in this instance. Okay, and last but not least, and if you've seen any of my teaching videos, you've heard me say this about 1,000,000 times, right? You've got to log correct repetitions. This is strategy number 10. If you want to build chops, you have to log correct repetitions, because when you're doing things wrong, you're actually teaching your hands incorrect habits. This is a fine line, because you're like, wait, you just told me that I'm going to have to move into extreme tempos and look terrible, and I shouldn't stop, and I'm finishing like this, and I'm tired. And that's not a correct repetition. That's true, right? But you also remember that the caveat to this, which is, let's see, strategy number 3 is to put this up against something that you can do well. So after you do this, you go back to playing 8s. So now I remember what it feels like to relax, and then I go back to it again. One more time. You go back to saying like, hey body, this is what it's supposed to feel like after we've gone through all this, after I've beaten you up. Let's go back to what we're trying to get it to be, which is that correct repetition feel. So as long as you go back and you log those correct repetitions, you know, my teacher once told me it was 7. Like for every incorrect repetition you do, you need to do it correctly 7 times just to cancel that one that you did incorrectly, right? And that same teacher also told me that you have to do it correctly 10 times in a row before you go on to the next bit. I remember I was once trying to explain this to one of my middle school students, and he was like a golfer. He also took golf lessons. And I was like, what does your golf teacher tell you to do when you miss this thing? He's like, yeah, you got to sink it 20 times before you can go on. I was like, yeah, do the same thing for your percussion playing then. You need to play this right 20 times. I used the golf teacher's number. You got to do this right 20 times in a row before you can go on. And they were like, oh, okay. And I'd said it every other way up to this point, but for some reason when I related it to golf, they got it. And you got to log those correct repetitions. So if you've got all the fundamentals in place, as you go faster, as you play more difficult passages, if you've logged those correct repetitions and you're not squeezing or doing weird things in your playing, that's what's going to allow you to be able to play faster, higher, lower, longer, more endurance, and build your chops so that you can play stronger, faster, louder, all that good stuff. Okay? All right, that's all I've got for today, everyone. Thank you so much. If you've watched all the way to the end here, I realize I've made that mistake where I stayed in music mode for too long. Wow, we still have a whole bunch of people who are watching right now, so thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions for me, we'll take just a couple of Q&As. We've gone past our time, but again, I'm not going to be able to live stream as much next week, so it's okay if we have a few extra minutes. If you have a couple open Q&A questions, that's fine. If not, thank you for tapping those outgoing likes. Please do take a moment to subscribe, follow, and share if you haven't done so yet. I really appreciate I can see those shares coming through my feed, so those of you who are sharing these out into groups or into your own timelines, I really, really do appreciate that. And if you have questions or suggestions for future lesson topics, send me a direct message. And all these live streams are coming from questions, right? As much as I could make up a bunch of lesson topics, but all these lessons are coming from people asking questions, and then me realizing that that's a question I get all the time, and then I combine them into one lesson, and I can kind of curate the questions into one lesson topic, and then create one of these live streams for you guys. So that's all I've got. Reminder that today is the last day for this free download, the live lesson pack. Oh, did I mess this up? Oh, there we go. The free download over here, today's the last day for that, so head over there. And then it's not up yet, but if you're catching this on the replay after the fact, if you go to huei-yuan.com/free lessons, let's see, this link down here. If you go there, there's a bunch of previous lessons all know. So like we're in episode 6 today of season 4. So all the handouts from episodes 1 through 5 are up on the website right now. And I'll upload the handout for season 6, which basically is an outline of these lessons here in a little bit. Okay? All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Blessings to everyone that is watching from all over the world. I know this is a very strange time for all of us, and I wish all the best for you and your families. I hope everyone is staying safe, staying well, socially distancing from each other, washing our hands, not touching our faces, and just stay healthy, stay positive, be kind to each other, empathize with one another. And thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. All right. Bye, everyone.